Ay, papi! Have we got something delicioso for you? Today we're making some beef fajitas topped with homemade pico de gallo, sautéed peppers, and caramelized onions. To pair with it, we've grilled some yellow squash and calabaza squash. When cooking a meal, generally you want to start with whatever takes the longest. In this case, it's the caramelized onions. Let's start with those.
Helpful for life.
So the first step is you're going to want to peel the onion. And the easiest way to do that is just cut it in half, right down the middle, through the root, or whatever it's called. And then you're going to just grab the first kind of fleshy layer, and you'll use that as your bottom layer to pull off that skin. And yes, you're wasting a little bit of onion when you do this, but it's worth it to make sure that you don't get that papery crap inside of your food. And so we'll just peel this second guy as well. Okay, comes off nice and clean. So with slicing, it's actually quite simple. You're just gonna take your knife and you're gonna run up the onion. You're gonna have the root on your left or right and have it basically be perpendicular to the knife, and you're gonna slice this way. So first I'm just gonna cut off the root, throw that off to the side, and then I'll just use this nice blade rocking motion. Just get some thin slices. And then when you get to the root, just toss the root off to the side. And then you're left with these beautiful onion wedges. And you wonder, well, how do you get from that to this? And the reality is, as you cook, it'll kind of naturally start to separate. And you can use your spatula or whatever to break it up. Or you can just take your finger now and break apart the many layers. You must remember, onions are like ogres. They have many layers. You have to peel back one at a time. All right, so to go with our delicious caramelized onions, we're gonna slice up some green peppers. Peppers and onions go great with fajitas. So let's show you how to cut up a bell pepper. It's really not too complicated, actually. You just cut it in half, but don't go all the way through. Just kind of go around the outside like this.
Round the outside, round the outside.
And then you can kind of just pull it apart like that. And then all of the seeds and the core, if you will kind of stay on one side. So then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your knife and you're gonna just cut that part off. And so now you got all the seeds in the core, just put that off to the side. Then what you're gonna do, we're gonna slice these up. So just cut it right next to that white rind. You don't wanna include that in your food. And then you're gonna take your knife and you're gonna just take that part right out. Then going to put it into slices. And so the best way to do this is put it skin side up, just kind of press down a little bit. That'll help flatten it up. And then just slice it using the same claw technique and the pinch and curl. There you have it, a beautifully sliced pepper. Enjoy. So we're going to start by lighting this, and we're gonna put it on medium heat. Plop in some butter. We've got a decent amount of onion, so we'll put in a decent amount of butter. A couple of pads, and you can always add more. And I'll let that butter melt down. And it can continue to melt after you add the onions, so that's probably good enough for now. And the cool thing about onions is they have a lot of moisture, and so this looks like a lot of onions, but after you cook them down, a lot of that moisture evaporates and they get a lot smaller. It's actually kind of surprising. So even though it looks like, you know, this is maybe a little too many onions for this one pan, I would advise using a bigger pan. But again, they'll reduce some, so this won't result in the most perfect caramelized onions, but it'll do for today. So I'm just going to give it a little shake to help that butter kind of get moved around. I'm going to toss them around a little bit too. And actually, since this is so many onions, I'm gonna add a little more butter. Oh yeah, and you can do this with oil as well if you want something that's a little healthier, or if you just don't really like butter or you can't handle dairy. But butter makes it delicious. Okay, so as you're stirring these, after they have been on for a while, you may want to flip them over. So you can see how some of these got a little bit of brown. Still working their way through. Not too much browning yet, but you can tell that it's starting to work its magic. Stir, shake, and sit. All right, so if you take a look at these guys, you can tell they've browned significantly, they've reduced a lot in size, and they just smell delicious. So since we're using them for fajitas, we're gonna stop right about here. Actually, we're gonna add in some bell peppers and saute those as well.
So, unfortunately, we did not film the cooking of the peppers, but fortunately, it's pretty straightforward and simple to do. Simply push the onions to one side of the pan, or of course, if they're already cooked to your liking, you can take them out. Then you may want to add a little bit more butter, but that's completely up to you. Then you just need to cook the peppers as long as you want to. Personally, we like to cook them until they've softened just a little bit, but they still have that bite. But we also like to get a little bit of browning from them so we get a little extra flavor. All right, let's get back to the rest of the meal.
All right, so today we're going to teach you how to make pico de gallo. It's a delicious Mexican treat. It's used as a dip, served with chips usually, and it's also great on tacos, fajitas, and all kinds of stuff.
All right, let's get started with the tomatoes.
So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to cut off the tail end and the top end. Then you're just going to hold it with one hand, and you're just going to slice it like this. You can do it all in one stack if you want, or if it's easier, do 2 stacks and put the bigger side down, give it a little more stability. But we'll just go ahead and do 1 stack. So you're gonna cut it in strips like this. And again, be careful with your thumb. That's the main thing in risk. You may have to switch your grip up when you get to the tail end. And just kind of align it to where they're all the same, going the same way. And then I turn them, and then just run the knife through. That same pinch and curl, and that same rocking motion. Then we end up with a nice little dice there.
After the tomatoes, typically we'll cut the red onion.
So to dice, just like with the slicing, first thing you're going to do is cut it down the middle with the root on one side. Then you're going to peel off the outer layer. Okay. So you are going to cut off the tip, is what I'll call it. I don't know what it's actually called, but you're going to leave the stem or root on. So the way this is going to work, you're going to do 3 different angles of cuts. The first one will go towards the root. The second one will actually turn our knife sideways and we'll cut also towards the root. And then the final cut, we'll cut like this to get this beautiful dice. So let's start out with this one. So you're going to take your blade and you're going to cut, but you're not going to cut quite all the way to the root. You're going to get most of the way. And depending on how big of a dice you want, you'll make these cuts closer together or further apart. If you want a smaller dice, obviously you want them to be closer together. So then once you've done that, so the reason you leave the root on is because the root actually helps hold this all together while you're cutting it, and it makes it that much easier. So then you're going to turn your blade sideways, and be careful. You can go slow. So you're just going to cut sideways, and again, not quite all the way through. And for this size onion, just 2 cuts will be good. The bigger the onion, you may need more. And then your last cut is the good old rocking cut that you're used to by now, hopefully. And be careful with your thumb. That's the main area of danger when you're cutting this way. And then with the stem, you can actually turn it sideways to get that last bit of onion off of there. And then you'll just throw out the rest of the root. And then you've got a nice, beautifully diced onion.
Then we'll slice up the limes to get them ready to be juiced. Cut it in half across the equator and then chop off the north and south poles to expose the flesh. Bonus points if you realize this is a lemon on screen. Next is the jalapeno.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to cut off the stem. And then I'm just going to cut this guy right down the middle. And so if you want to reduce the heat, one thing you can do is remove the rind and the seeds. So if you want to do that, cut this kind of like we showed you with the bell pepper, where you just kind of cut around the side, and that way you can scoop out that rind a little easier. But I'm going to include the rind and the seeds because we're making some pico. We like a little bit of heat in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut right through the middle. So once you make that one lengthwise cut, basically we're going to make long cuts here and then the short cuts here to get a nice dice for our pico. And again, if you want this to be bigger or smaller, adjust your cuts accordingly based on what you're using it for. We like it decently small, but not too tiny, so you can still get a good bite of it. And as with any pepper you're cutting, you may want to consider wearing gloves because the capsaicin in there will stick to your fingers. And if you end up touching your eye or your nether regions, then you can end up with some painful times. So that's pretty much it. That's how you dice a jalapeno, take it from pepper to dice.
And finally, the cilantro. We usually save it for last since it sticks to the cutting board.
Be careful, they'll have a lot of times a little wire thing that holds them together. So you just keep that in mind. I'll just kind of slide it down towards the bottom, and we're gonna cut off basically right above that. We've got the bottom of it has thicker stems, and you know, I think it's perfectly fine to eat. It's just more of a texture thing. We focus more on the nice leafy section. So I'm gonna take this in my hand, and basically I'm just gonna do the same pinch and curl technique. I'm gonna rock my knife across to give it kind of a rough chop. And then I'm gonna rotate the other direction to get it a little smaller. The things with herbs you have to be careful about is you don't wanna cut too much or you'll get them crushed and they will lose their texture and they won't look as appealing. So you wanna make sure you're not cutting too much. And then when you do cut, make sure that you're cutting it all the way through and not just mashing it. So a sharp knife is good for this. So yeah, just run through that knife with that rocking motion. And pick out any big stems if you see some that you may not want to eat. And this last part here is mostly stem, so I'm going to get rid of that as well. Okay, so then I'll just go the other direction. And it's gotten a little smaller, but we like it much smaller for our pico. So another technique you can use is you can keep your left hand or your non-dominant hand on the tip of the knife, and then you can even move your grip down like this if you want for this technique, and just kind of chop like this. Make sure you clean off the blade every now and then, and if you are going to scrape with the knife blade side down, make sure you're doing it at a shallow enough angle where you're not going to dull the blade. But do that to scoop underneath it a little bit. Move this around, see how it's looking. I like it a little more fine than this, so we'll keep going. Again, don't be afraid to be forceful because you want to make sure that you cut through and that you're not just bruising the herb. All right, so this is about where we want it. All right, so now that we've got everything all cut up, let's go ahead and show you how to assemble the pico. So in this container here, we've got all of our tomatoes and all of our jalapenos. Now, The jalapeno, you may want to wait to add until the end, so you can add in just enough and then taste it and see if you want it a little spicier, then add it. We went all in this time. So the red onion, however, this is something that we usually save for last because we don't like it to be too oniony. So we mix it all together, add some onion, then mix it up and then add more if we need to. And the same goes with the cilantro and the lime. We're gonna start out with 2 limes here. We've got an extra one in case we need it. And of course we got salt and pepper. So it's really very simple. So you're just gonna take some of your cilantro, sprinkle it in. The cilantro gives some delicious flavor, but it also, that green adds a beautiful pop. And then we'll add a bunch of this onion in. Oh yeah, it smells good. And then I'm gonna squeeze in these limes. Again, pico is largely personal preference, so we like ours pretty limey, but you can add in what you think tastes good to you. You don't need to worry too much about the exact amounts, it's just about getting that mix. So then we're gonna add our salt and pepper. Be generous with the salt because there's a lot of ingredients here. Some people will add other things, maybe some cumin or things like that to spice it up a little bit, but we like the good old salt and pepper mix. And you can see just how beautiful this looks. In addition to tasting amazing, it just is so pretty and people really love it. And you know, if you're into Instagram, this is great for that. Now you can just try this with a spoon, but the real way to try it is with a tortilla chip. And so you gotta get you one of those and excuse me, the bite of that corn with a little bit of the salt that's on the tortilla chip and make sure it makes a good balance. But yeah, just check that out. Look how beautiful that is. Let me grab a tortilla chip. These are the kind of scoops so you can get all kinds of that tasty goodness in there. I think it's actually pretty good. Let's get this fajita meat nice and seasoned. So first, I'm gonna squeeze in some olive oil. Then I'll go ahead and add the limes.
Then we'll season it with salt, pepper, onion powder, cumin, cayenne, and garlic powder.
So now that you got all of this in here, here comes the fun part. This is where you get your hands dirty. So you're gonna wanna make sure that this is all coating all of the meat. We will throw this guy in the fridge until we are ready to work with it.
Now let's cut up our squash for the grill.
So first we're just gonna take the squash, we're gonna cut off the top and the bottom. Just put those off to the side. And since we're gonna be grilling these, we are gonna cut them into medallions. And we want them to be thick enough to where they can hold up to the heat well and they don't get mushy and they don't get too charred or anything like that. So we're probably gonna be cutting in about 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch thick. You can see here kind of what they look like. So yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. You just move down the squash using that same pinch and curl technique. And then the next thing you know, you've got some cut up squash. All right, so first we're gonna do pretty similar seasoning here as we did with our meat, just no cumin. So we're gonna add some olive oil. Get that kind of enough to coat it. Some good healthy pinches of salt.
And then pepper, cayenne, garlic powder, and onion powder.
And then the best way to toss these, of course, is with your hands. All right, so these got a nice little coating as well as my hand, you can see here. So those are ready to go. We'll plop those on the grill here in a little bit.
One last step before we throw food on the grill. Preheat the grill on high for about 10 minutes, then brush it clean.
So we've got our vegetable pan here directly on the grill. We're gonna go ahead and dump our veggies right into that basket. So we're getting a little bit of that char and grill on some of it. All right, let's throw this beef on. That smells delicious. Just make sure it's nice and flat on the grill. And so we've got that on high. I'm going to lower it down to medium high. And that's only going to take a couple of minutes on each side. All right, let's see how this steak's looking. Getting a little bit of grill marks on there. Not quite ready to flip yet. So now that we've used these tongs on our raw beef, we'll keep it to the raw beef for now, and we'll use these other tongs for the veggies. Give those a little bit of a toss. Oh yeah, and the ones on the bottom are definitely getting those delicious grill marks on there. And to be able to tell when this squash is done, you can just take your tong and kind of just stick it inside of a piece of squash to see how firm it is. And you know, it starts off decently firm, but after it's cooked for a while, it'll soften up. And these are probably good to eat, but caught that. Those are probably good to eat, but we will let them cook a little more. Hopefully we can get a little bit more of that grill mark on there, make it even more tasty. Keeping hydrated. All right, let's flip this steak. You know, take the tongs and kind of loosen it up a little bit, just in case it's stuck a little bit. Oh yeah, that's looking beautiful. And toss our veggies again. Oops. Those are gonna be tasty. And the steak isn't gonna take nearly as long on this side as it does the other side. And the way you know the steak is done is one way, which is kind of the recommended way, is you stick in a probe thermometer into the thickest part of the meat to see how hot it is, make sure it gets to that recommended temperature. And as you know, with beef, there's rare, medium rare, all the way to well done. And with the beef, we're gonna wanna take it off a couple of minutes before we think it's done, because it will retain some of that heat and it will continue to cook after we've taken it off the heat. So I thought this steak was just a little less than we wanna do. So we're gonna take it off here in just a second, as well as the veggies, because those were looking good, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, let's get this stuff off the grill. So start off with the beef. Take these bad boy. And then let's grab this grill basket here. You can use your tongs and pull it like this, or you can get yourself a nice little pot holder. And then we'll close the grill. Yeah, those veggies look good. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and turn off our heat. And we recommend to turn off the gas source as well. In this case, we've got natural gas, so I'll go cut off the gas line. But if you have propane, make sure you close that propane off just as an extra measure of safety. So you can see what we've accomplished here. We've got our beef here and our veggies. So let's take these bad boys inside and get us some fajitas. All right, let's get to the important part, which is making the plate. As you can see here, we moved some of our grilled veggies on here. We heated up a tortilla on a skillet to get it nice and hot and get a little bit of a crisp to it. And we threw on those peppers and onions we made earlier. Oh, this is gonna be delicious. So here we've got a piece of our steak here. And so if you look closely at the steak, you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see on the video or not, but look closely and you'll be able to see grain, the alignment of the muscle fiber. So ideally what you wanna do is you wanna cut across that muscle fiber, and that will keep it from being too chewy. If you cut with the muscle fiber, sometimes you get those long fibers, it'll be a little more chewy. So this is what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take it and we're gonna cut it at a little bit of an angle here. I've got my knife at a 45-degree angle, and honestly, that's mostly just to make it look nice and pretty. I don't think it has any effect texturally, as far as I know, but it makes the pieces look, one, it makes the pieces a little bigger, and it makes it a lot more sexy. I'll show you here after I get it to fan out. Yeah. So you just get the steak out here like this, and then here's the real trick. You get some fresh lime and you squeeze it right on top of this. And that extra juices can give it a nice little pop. Gonna make it taste that much more delicious. Oh yeah. And so here we have our beautiful steak, as you can see here. And if you're looking to try and date somebody, cook this for them and see what they think. I bet they will like to date you if you cook this for them. So we're just gonna take a couple pieces of that beef, and we're gonna have it right here on our taco. And then if you like, give a little bit of pinch of cheese. And then we have a beautiful fajita here. And just for you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and sacrifice. Oh, how could I almost forget the pico? Oh yeah, you gotta take some of that beautiful goodness that we made earlier today. Scoop that on there. And then just for you guys, I will sacrifice and take a bite. So good. The caramelized onions get a little bit of sweetness to it. A little bit of bite from the onion, from the pico. The beef came out to be a nice medium. I'm gonna try one of these grilled veggies. Also good. Nice flavor of the squash, a little bit of the grill taste. Enjoy.